Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today with Kathy Lutes. Kathy will be discussing loneliness, the causes, and tips to overcome it. She will explore the healing agents of awareness, acceptance, and compassion so that you choose when you want to be alone and how not to feel lonely again. Kathy currently works as a director of counseling for the church at Rancho Bernardo. Having been diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 1995, and spending years in and out of psych hospitals, she's developed a deep compassion for the mentally ill, and she has been a passionate advocate for 18 years for those living with a mental health diagnosis. She understands firsthand the devastating ramifications of the illness and the stigma that surrounds it. She sits on the board of directors for Community Alliance for Healthy Minds and is on the steering committee for the North Island Faith-Based Partnership Council. She is a certified mental health coach for the Mental Health Grace Alliance and pioneered the Grace groups in the state of California. Kathy has numerous other accomplishments and awards in the mental health field. We are so pleased to have you today with us, Kathy. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Debbie. It's great to be here. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this call today. And loneliness is a big problem for a lot of people, certainly not limited to people who have bipolar disorder, but we're going to just explore some of the things that make it a little bit more difficult and another kind of an obstacle in our lives. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. And if you read the introduction for the webinar today, you saw this statement: feeling lonely isn't a mental health problem in and of itself. However, having a mental health problem increases your chance of feeling lonely, and feeling lonely can have a negative impact on your mental health. So how's that for a little circle, right? So we are people living with a mental health issue, which can increase our sense of feeling lonely, and being lonely has a negative impact on our mental health. So clearly we need to figure this out, how to get past the loneliness. So I hope that today, when our webinar is done, that you're going to feel that you are more empowered in taking control of this part of your life. I hope to give you some tools and some tips and just explore this issue together. So here's some of the things we're going to be talking about. We're going to, what defines loneliness, the importance of having relationships, the benefits of having relationships, ways that we connect some of our challenges as people with bipolar, how to manage expectations in our relationships, increase our own awareness, and then some practical steps toward connectedness. I think you're going to enjoy some of the things that you get to hear today, and I really enjoyed putting this together and learned a lot myself. What really struck me as I was doing the research is in just about every single definition and article I looked at, one of the words that went with loneliness is perception. So it's really about how do we think when we're alone? How do we, what is the story we're telling ourselves? So you can see here, loneliness is perceived social isolation, what you want from your social relationships and your perception of those relationships. Another thing I found interesting is that just like hunger or pain are cues for us to do something, so is loneliness. It is very much a cue that something is amiss in our lives that needs to be addressed. One of the things, too, that is common in loneliness is that a lot of people that feel lonely have low self-esteem, underdeveloped sense of worthiness. Maybe they don't feel like they're likable, maybe they don't like the way they look, and all of those things just contribute to kind of keeping us isolated. And when you look at this page and you see some of these things here, I'm pretty sure that you're going to say, yeah, I felt a lot of those things myself. There's different types of loneliness. Situational loneliness, I found this interesting that this is when we've had an emotional separation from somebody. So generally, this is going to be something where a relationship has been altered possibly forever. So that would be certainly what happens when somebody that we love dies. It happens in divorce sometimes. When we move, when we change jobs, we become removed from people that may have been meaningful to us. And then the emotional loneliness. And this is really about how we feel when we're in a group. This is the kind of loneliness that you can be around a lot of people and you still feel very lonely because you haven't really connected on an emotional level. You don't really feel that maybe you belong there or that people there understand you. And then really the most serious type of loneliness is the chronic loneliness. And perhaps sometimes you felt this way. And what I found interesting is that chronic loneliness can result from persistent feelings of not belonging or of not being understood. Well, as people with bipolar disorder, we are so often misunderstood. And the thing is that I think we need to give a lot of grace to the people in our lives. If you have not experienced bipolar, you really can't understand it. We can do our best to educate them and to help them understand. But that continual sense of not feeling understood is one of the things that is really dangerous for us and why we need to find good support in our lives. So what are some of the factors that play into loneliness? So a lack of social skills. And what this means is that we're real comfortable in certain settings, but as I was thinking about this, I thought, well, if I went to something that was a really formal event, let's say like a state dinner or something like that with the president, like I would totally not fit into that because I wouldn't know how to act. I wouldn't know what the proper protocols are. So I feel very, very inadequate to be there. I wouldn't have the social skills needed. So you're really good in certain situations, but you may not have the skills in all situations. Certainly being depressed adds to that because depression makes us want to isolate. It sucks the energy out of us and it keeps us alone. Social phobia, social anxiety. The good news about these are that with some good help, you can overcome these. But this is where it just becomes really intensely painful and frightening to be out and around people. And for some of us, we've had that experience that hopefully you are working with somebody who can help you to know what skills you can develop to get over that. To me, I think the biggest one on this list is that fear of rejection. Okay, who hasn't ever been afraid of that? None of us like to be rejected. And as people living with bipolar disorder, we can run into a lot of rejection. I have. There's a lot of stigma having a diagnosis, and that's a big fear for me. So I think that that's going to be probably a big one. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. The pseudo friendships, what we develop on Facebook or video game interaction, those aren't really the kind of friends that are going to show up when you have a need. And so they almost are a false sense of relationship. I'm not saying that they're bad, it's just you don't want only that. So in a sense, what you want to do is let those Facebook friends kind of augment your face-to-face relationships, but not be in place of those. Being single, feeling like everybody else is married, that's really a lonely place to be, or you might be divorced or widowed. And again, these are just things that we have to think about. This is our perception that we're very alone in some of these states. The past hurts in relationships can keep us from reaching out. Hugely fast pace of life that we live, and most importantly, our state of mind. And I think that we're going to be talking about that as we go through this. I really like this next slide because I think it's profound. You love the little picture here. A cute little guy, but he's very sad. And that's because his happiness is depending on somebody else. And this is really important. This was an important lesson that I learned, is that I am the person responsible for my happiness. Nobody else is. And not even my circumstances. Because if we think about it, happiness is kind of fleeting, right? We're happy when things go well, but things don't always go well. So we have to find our place of being content. And we want relationships because those are a great thing to have. They help us be healthier. But we can't depend or wait for other people to make us happy because we will suffer for a long time when we do that. So one of the things to think about is that when you're by yourself, connect with yourself. It's very interesting too, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, is like how some people thrive spending time alone. And so again, that state of perception. But when you find yourself by yourself, connect. What are the things that you like to think about? What are some of the things you like to do that really nobody you know likes to do? Like maybe in this picture, painting. Maybe you're the only one who likes to paint, so paint when you're by yourself. Do things that can help to improve the quality of your life. So here's the thing, and the difference between loneliness and being alone. So in this first sentence, being alone is a state of being. So I'm by myself, there's nobody around, I'm alone. But loneliness is a state of mind. So again, what is the story that you're telling yourself when you're by yourself? I just saw yesterday, it was real timely, an article about Al Worden. Now, I'm not going to assume that you know who that is, but he was one of the astronauts on the Apollo 15 mission. And so on this mission, the other two astronauts went and they were down on the moon doing some exploration, but he was the command module pilot. So he stayed up and he kept going around the moon while they were working. So typically he got about 3 hours of sleep a day, and his day was filled with doing a lot of scientific work, photographing and things like that. And so during this time, he would go to the dark side of the moon. And on that dark side of the moon, there was no communication, not with the astronauts on the moon, and no communications with Earth. Everything was cut off, and it's a little dark back there. And so in an interview, he was asked, wasn't it lonely? And here's his reply. There's a thing about being alone, and there's a thing about being lonely, and they're two different things. I was alone, but I was not lonely. I thoroughly enjoyed it. He enjoyed the silence and being able to focus on his work without being interrupted. He knew he wasn't truly alone, and that Houston would be back in contact when the Earth rose above the horizon at the moon. So you can be alone without feeling lonely, even if you're at the dark side of the moon. And you can feel alone even when you aren't. So what I liked about this is that he knew he wasn't truly alone and that Houston would be back in contact. So I think for us is that when we're feeling really lonely, it's important to remind ourselves, okay, I'm by myself today. I didn't really want to be by myself today, but I won't always be by myself. So remember, that state of loneliness is what are you telling yourself when you're alone. So I had to include this slide because it has ice cream on it, which is one of my favorite things. And but I like what it said. What a lovely surprise to finally discover how unlonely being alone can be. So here's a couple of thoughts on the slide to think about being alone. So let's think about a couple of things that we want to know about ourselves. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? This is a big thing because the defining difference between introverts and extroverts is that introverts get recharged by spending time alone, and extroverts are recharged by being around people. So my husband is an introvert and I'm an extrovert, and I didn't know that for a long time. And when I'd want to set up a date to go meet with another couple or do something like that. For people who are introverts, it drains their energy to be around people. And but for me, like, I love being around people, so I get all charged up when I'm with people. And so you need to know, are you an introvert or are you an extrovert? All of us are a combination, but we're going to be more one than the other. So also, do you feel alone when you're in a room full of people? So if you are feeling alone, lonely, in a room full of people, begin to observe, why do you think that is? Do you feel disconnected? Do you feel misunderstood? Do you feel like you don't belong? For you, does your loneliness ever go away? Or are you the one with the chronic loneliness? And if you have chronic loneliness, begin to ask yourself, why? But when the loneliness goes away, what are you doing? Who are you with? Because what you want to do is do more of what you're doing when the loneliness goes away, and you want to be with more of those people, that the loneliness goes away when you're with them. Do you blame yourself for your loneliness? When do you enjoy being alone? A very important question, do you like yourself? Use your lonely times to connect with God and or your spirituality. That last question though, do you like yourself? I did not like myself, hated myself, and didn't really enjoy my company. And as some of you maybe have experienced, there were times in my life I didn't feel safe to be by myself. When I was deeply depressed, feeling like I didn't want to live anymore, I didn't want to be in my own company. So one of the things we want to do is understand for ourselves, when are we safe to be by ourselves? And when is it a good time to not be around other people? So a couple things. So one of the things that's very interesting are the health benefits of relationships, but on the reverse side of that um, are some of the things that are the adverse effects of loneliness. So the thing is that when we're feeling isolated, we begin to get in the spiral of telling ourselves the story about that, right? So we think, well, nobody loves me, I don't really belong, and nobody ever invites me to anything. And unfortunately, when we're depressed and we isolate, those thoughts go uninterrupted, and we just continue that spiral of thinking down and down, and it gives that voice to our inner critic, which probably most of you have heard about. And that critic just reminds us, like, yeah, see, nobody likes you, nobody wants to be around you, and there's nothing when we're by ourselves to interrupt that. So those are times when you want to have a plan, like who can you call? Maybe you just need to walk outside, maybe you need to go to the store and just interact with another person. But being alone often is not a healthy thing. And here's what's interesting. In doing the research, is study after study has found that there are so many health benefits to being in connected relationships. So some of them are listed here, and you're going to see that I more specifically mentioned some of the ways that relationships help us. So clearly, it's going to improve our mood, reduce stress and depression. We have some support when things are going badly. When we're with other people and then connected relationships, it raises our sense of self-worth. Probably most of us could use that boost. It improves our physical health. And here's what's interesting. So being in good and healthy connected relationships boosts our immune function, decreases our risk for diabetes, and increases cardiovascular function. So look at that. It's amazing that we have the ability to improve our life by making good connections. And you know, it's a universal thing. We all need to feel like we're needed. We need to feel like we are wanted somewhere, we belong, and there's a purpose for being alive. And we find that often when we're in relationships. And consider this. One of the clearest indications that we've been designed for relationships is the fact that solitary confinement is the worst punishment that can be given to a prisoner. So if a prisoner has acted badly, they will put them in solitary confinement. That means that they get maybe 1 hour a day where they get to be taken outside. They have little to no interaction with another person. Often there's a little slot that their meals get pushed through. They don't get to talk to other prisoners. Often they don't have media, they don't have a TV, they don't get anything. They are just by themselves. And if you ever read about that, you'll see that after a period of time, I mean, it can make you really crazy. And so I find that interesting that as people with bipolar in our depressive phase, we pull away and we isolate. So we are doing to ourselves this very thing that is some of the worst punishment on mankind. I don't know, I found that fascinating. Hope you find it interesting too. So there's a couple different ways we connect, and I think this is good to think about. Intellectually, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and situationally. So if you think about the people you know, there's some relationships that are really feed your intellect. It's because you share the ideas about life. You can get together, you guys can talk about the election without hurting each other. You can just discuss the things that are going on in the world, technology, and you love just kind of solving all the problems of the world. But those people that you connect with intellectually may not be such a great emotional connection. When we're connected to somebody emotionally, this is a person that we feel safe with. And when we feel safe, we can confide our feelings. We can be vulnerable to them. So sometimes those intellect friends aren't our emotional friends, and sometimes our emotional friends aren't our intellectual friends. Psychologically, so this is kind of interesting. Psychologically is just where, you know what, I love you no matter what, you're good. And we're at ease no matter who we're with. And I think this is a hard place to get to, because what we tend to do is be very judgmental. When we see people that we think look different than us, we make a lot of assumptions or make a lot of judgments. So when you can get to the point that it's just like, wow, you have tattoos all over your face and you have piercings in every part of your body, how cool are you? So it's like not being intimidated by that or put off by that. Spiritual connections. What I like about our spiritual connections is, well, you can see here that shared core values for life and the way we live our life and the way we think. But also is that our spiritual connections can often feed the top three. Intellectually, we may want to talk about the things that are going on in the world in a different kind of a way. Certainly in our faith communities, we can have those emotional connections. And I think in a faith community, more times there's acceptance than not, but also sometimes that's not the case. But the thing about our spiritual connections is that they can offer us a hope that transcends our human element. And then situationally. So sometimes we're connected to people because of where we are. For instance, I've had friends that I worked with who I loved, and we were close friends. But when we didn't work together anymore, we fell apart. And it was because we were living on two separate planes. We no longer got to see each other every day. We were busy raising our families. I loved them. Nothing about that changed. We just didn't get the opportunity to see each other every day. And I hate that because these are people who I love. And so you have to be more purposeful to stay in touch. Sometimes we had to move, or we move into a new place, so we get to connect there. So our situations definitely help us to connect with people. Okay, how are you guys doing? Hope you're doing good. The next thing I want to look at is what are some of our challenges specifically as people living with bipolar. Now, before I go over the slide, I just want to say that these can be a problem for anybody. So they're not particular to people with bipolar. However, I do believe that they pose more of a challenge. And here's the thing too, as we read through this list, I just want you to realize that this is a challenge we have in keeping relationships. And sometimes these are the challenges our friends face in having a relationship with us. So mood instability can be a big thing for us, right? Sometimes we really are feeling great, especially if we're in one of our manic phases or hypomanic phases. Like we feel wonderful and we want to be out there doing everything, but then we change on a dime, right? And now I don't want to talk to you anymore. I don't answer your calls. And so that's hard, right, for our friends, but it's also hard for us because we don't know what we're going to wake up feeling like. Certainly the lack of energy and the depression that we have in a depressive phase. I know that for me, what began early in my symptoms was just the inability to do anything. And I'd lay down on the couch and I would just, after I get my kids out to school, and I think, okay, I'm just going to lay here for a half an hour, but eventually it turned into all day. And I felt like a 100-pound bag of cement was on my chest and I couldn't do anything. So that's pretty tough to say in relationships when you just don't even feel like you can get out of bed. And again, with the depression comes that desire to isolate. So we cut ourselves off from the relationship. So that's not good for us, but it's also not good for the people that we're friends with. They don't understand, like, why aren't we calling them back? And if they, sometimes people take that all really personally. Well, you must be really mad at me if you're not calling me back. Another big challenge is a distorted thinking that we can have during our episodes. We're going to talk a little bit more about what I mean by that. Our self-focus. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about myself here because maybe I'm the only person, but I sort of describe having bipolar as living in a room full of mirrors because everything was about me. And what I mean by that is that I spent so much time, I think, thinking about how bad I felt that I was missing out on so many other things. And I did take everything very personally, so it's all about me. So maybe that was unique to me, but I think sometimes it is a struggle that we have. And because of that, that makes me not as available to the people I'm in relationship with. And that's not such a good way to have a healthy relationship. One of the other things that I wanted to mention is that the anxiety in the people who love us really increases when we're depressed. If we've been suicidal or made suicide attempts, this is really scary for them when they don't hear from us or when we isolate or we don't call them back. And so again, this is just a challenge that we need to be aware of, and it's harder to communicate when we don't feel well. But going along with how we feel about ourselves. So often what accompanies having a diagnosis like ours is that we feel less than or not worthy or, like I don't belong anywhere. And the big one is making assumptions about what other people think. Have you ever done that? I'm not going to call them and ask them because I know they'd say no. Okay, well, that's mind reading. And you don't know that they'll say no. Maybe they said no once, but just because they said no once doesn't mean they'll always say no. So I hope that this helps you. There's probably things you could add to this list. And in fact, I'd like you to give that some thought. At the end, we're going to have an opportunity for some questions, but also you'll have my email address. And there's a couple of things that I've got here that I'd love to hear your stories about. So what are some challenges that you think having bipolar poses in your relationships? So here's some of our challenges. Let's look at how we can overcome that. So number one, depression, self-focus, and dysfunction. It's important to stay on our medication, to stay on things that we need to do to take care of ourselves. Now, admittedly,
Kathy,
yeah,
are you okay? You're back. We
yeah, I
lost.
just got a thing up that that I had lost the audio, so I didn't know if anybody heard me say I was going to sign back in. Yikes!
Okay, absolutely not a problem. These things
How
happen.
long?
So
How
everyone's
long have I?
experiencing a little technical difficulty, but we're fixing that.
Okay. So where did you lose
So
connection? Do
I
you
would
remember?
start back at the beginning of that last slide. It's been probably about 3 minutes.
So it was overcoming the overcoming challenges, or the one before that?
Yes, this slide.
Did you hear the bipolar challenges?
Yeah.
Yep. Did you guys hear this?
Yes, we heard that. Yes, correct.
Okay, so we go into overcoming the
Okay,
challenges.
next slide.
So sorry, you guys. I
Problem
don't
happened.
know why that happened, but of course we're going to have to.
We got it back on track.
Okay, good job. Thanks so much. Okay, so here we go. Overcoming the challenges. So we looked at some of the challenges that we have in relationships. As people living with bipolar, remember those aren't just for us, but sometimes they're a little bit bigger challenge. But I think that one of the most important things we can do to overcome a lot of those challenges is to stick to our treatment plan. And that means, staying on track with our medications, staying in touch with our therapists, and if our medications aren't working, working with a psychiatrist to get those right. And the truth is that you can get the right medication. It sometimes takes a really long time, but you will feel better. You will be more stable. And so that's just one of the things that's going to help you the most, to stick to that treatment plan. Don't make decisions apart from your treatment team. If you don't feel that you're good at knowing how to communicate to people, then you can get some books. Go to the library, check out some books. And like I mentioned before, know yourself. When are you in a good place to be around others? When is a better time for you to be by yourself? Resist self-focus by putting others' needs above your own. So become aware of, are you self-focused? When you have conversations with other people, are they inherently a lot about you? And how can you turn that around? One of the other things that's real important is being the one willing to initiate getting together. This is hard. Remember, we talked about that fear of rejection, but we need to be willing to do this, because if we don't reach out, then we just can be by ourselves and tell ourselves, oh, nobody wants to be with me. So I think that's important. Another thing is to keep a gratitude journal and write down 3 things that you're grateful for every day. And this has a lot of benefits. One is it can be great conversation starters. Like, for instance, let's say that you write down today that you saw a butterfly, and you talk to somebody later on and you go, you know what, there was the most beautiful butterfly flying outside my window today. And I just think about how amazing they are, that they are caterpillars, they become butterflies. And so that's one reason to keep a gratitude journal. But another is it begins to change our focus. We everybody can tend to just focus on all the things that we're unhappy about or that are painful for us. So this simple little thing of just writing three things down a day that we're grateful for can do a huge change for us. So I just recommend that you give that a try and see how that works for you. As I mentioned earlier, don't let the social media relationships be a substitute for the face-to-face. And studies have shown, just as it's shown the health benefits of relationships, it also has shown that these pseudo relationships actually increase loneliness. And in fact, because of social media, loneliness is more of a problem than it's been for a really long time. Recognize your distorted thinking and know the truth, and that is that people will disappoint you, but not everyone. So if we've had some bad encounters and we allow those bad things to keep us from ever reaching out again or ever having another friend, we've really hurt ourselves. So I think just being more realistic that, you know what, people will disappoint us, but the ones that don't are certainly worth overcoming a few of those. Okay, one of my favorite things to talk about, distorted thinking. And the reason it's one of my favorites is because I had all of this. And these are taken from a book by David Burns called Feeling Good. I hope you guys have read it, and if not, you'll find it at the end of this presentation. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of these, and you can certainly look this up later. I've given you the link to look at all of them. But an example of all or nothing thinking. So this is described as when you're caught up in all in this distortion and you fall short of perfect, you see yourself as a total failure. So there's not a middle ground. Like, for instance, if I didn't get the laundry done, then I would say, oh my gosh, I'm completely lazy. My house is a filthy, stinking mess because my laundry's not done. That may not be a shred of truth. Just say what's true. My laundry's not done. That doesn't mean I'm totally lazy. It means I didn't have the energy to do the laundry today. So I think probably a lot of us struggle with that. So you might want to ask yourself, when am I doing that? When am I really saying everything's bad when only this one little part of it was bad? Another one is the mental filter. So simply put, you filter out the positives of an experience and you dwell on the negatives. So for instance, let's say that you do a project and 20 people tell you how wonderful that project is, but you get one complaint. The mental filter is where we only focus on the complaint. Or if you're in school, it's where you get a 99% and not 100. And so you focus on that one mistake that you made. Or you get an A on a paper and you're disappointed because you didn't get an A+. So it's that kind of a thing. So that's really dangerous for us. Similar but very different is disqualifying the positive. So the thing about this is that when you disqualify the positive, you're not just dwelling on the negatives or ignoring the positives, but you go a step further and you actively transform neutral or positive experiences into negative ones. Here's an example. Let's say that you get a friendly message from somebody on your answering machine that you haven't heard from for a long time, but instead of feeling good about it, you turn it into something negative. And you say, oh, she only called me because she felt obligated to, not because she wants to continue the friendship. Have you done that? Oh my gosh, I would do that all the time. So begin to recognize these. Are these some of your thought patterns? And if they are, they're changeable. That's what's really exciting. And David Burns' book offers a really great way to battle these and to overcome them. One of my favorite things I learned in therapy was the danger of comparison. And the thing is that when we compare ourselves to others, we almost always come out at the low end of it. So I love this. Don't compare your insides to someone else's outsides. And you know, one of the most dangerous places for this to take place these days is on Facebook. And that is because we can see the pictures of everybody. Oh, they're at this party. Oh, they're on vacation. Oh, they have it all together. Oh, look at them. They're so happy. But you know what? We don't know. We don't really know that. And that's the whole thing. We really can't tell what's going on in somebody's life by looking at them, but we can make all these judgments, cast all these negative judgments on ourselves based on their outside. So I thought this was valuable. This really helps me to keep things in perspective. And I just remind myself, you know what? I really don't know what's going on with them. So I'm going to give you a really great tool to overcome some of these challenges. And if you've ever had dialectical behavioral therapy, you already know about this. This is action opposite of emotion. An action opposite of emotion is when you do the very thing you don't want to do. So, like for instance, in this one, when you want to withdraw and avoid other people, you go and you get with people anyway. And this, it does take energy to be able to do this. But this is going to be one of the most effective things that you can put into place. And what's great about it is it will help you to begin to get unstuck. So let's look at a couple of more examples about this. We talked earlier about the fear of rejection, which is huge. And everybody has it. So I really want you to think about that person you think of who, oh no, everybody loves them. And they're really confident. But you know what? They still have their own fears of being rejected. We all do, because remember that other side, we all want to belong. We all want to feel needed. But here's the thing, what we do, because we're so afraid somebody might reject us, is that we tell ourselves, oh, I don't want to do that because they wouldn't want to spend time with me. I'm sure they have better things to do. But see, that's mind reading. We're assuming we know what they're going to say. So I think it is that if they say yes, yeah, that's a great gift. And if they say no, that's okay. It's not necessarily personal. I know this is hard, but this is really important because I think so many of us are afraid of what other people are going to think or of other people not accepting us. So what is your opposite action is to reach out anyway. And just remember that the people you reach out to, they don't want to feel rejected either. And the thing is, if you don't reach out, you stay stuck. Nothing will change for you. And you could miss out on some of the best relationships of your life. So I know this is kind of scary, but I really want you to think about this. When are you most afraid? And why are you so afraid if they don't like you? Then there's somebody else that does. And I think that's another thing I found myself doing, was really spending a lot of time trying to get people who didn't like me to like me, instead of focusing my time on the people who did like me and spending more time there. So just something to think about. One of the other things I think is a big battle is this feeling of not wanting to do anything. And this is something I think is hard for people that have never had depression to understand. Like, well, just get up and do something. Don't be so lazy. It's certainly what I told myself. But the truth is that there's a real sense of heaviness that comes upon us in our depressive phase. So one of the best things that I learned in, my years of therapy, I think it was when I was in a day program, is they made this suggestion, is that if there's an area in your house that you're really unhappy with, set a timer for 5 minutes, and for 5 minutes go work in that area. So let's say your kitchen is full of dirty dishes. So set a timer, and for 5 minutes go work on those dirty dishes. When the timer goes off, stop. If you want to stop, stop. And here's what happens is that, what I would tell myself, okay, I can do something for 5 minutes. But when I looked at my whole kitchen, it looked like it was going to be weeks to take care of it. So the benefit here is that doing 5 minutes is 5 minutes more than you did the day before. It's better than doing nothing, and you feel like you got something accomplished. And so if you do this for a couple of days, every day, just 5 minutes, what I found, at least for me, is about 3 days in, the timer went off and I kept working. And what I like is this little statement here at the bottom. So that the idea is to focus on how you'll feel as a result of acting opposite to the current emotional experience. And this is hard, but the truth is we can get really upset with ourselves because we don't do the things we'd like to do. So start small, give yourself reason to succeed. If your house is a wreck, don't think in one day you're going to change that. But realize that, if I do 5 minutes today, I do 5 minutes tomorrow, I do 5 minutes for all this week, that's awesome. And you know what I love about being with other people who understand depression and bipolar is that you don't have to explain yourself when you say that my great success today was I brushed my teeth. And, you know, there were days that were like that. But this was a really good thing that helped me. Here's a little chart of some other um, emotions and how to act opposite. And I would recommend, you know, looking this up and getting more information about this too. So I think we've looked at some good ways to overcome some of our challenges, and I really want to give you something I think is super important, and that is thinking about your expectations in a relationship. So I think I love this quote. I didn't even know that this quote was out there until I started looking at this, but expectation is the root of all heartache. So here's what I found is that when I put high expectations on myself, I put high expectations on other people too. And of course, they might let me down. I've got 3 grown children, and I adore them, and I wish I had a lot more time with them. And I could call them and complain, like, why don't you call me more? But what I realized is that I chose to have them. They don't owe me anything. And so it has helped me to view everything I get from them as a gift. So when they call, I'm just thrilled. When I get to see them, I'm just happy, instead of expecting that they need to do what I want them to do. So I think this is big. You want to think about, you know, what are some of the expectations that you place on your friends? And maybe they're just not realistic. If we could just change our view on that a little bit, I think then everything becomes a gift. And it really helps. You know, you'll see here in this paragraph, tempering your expectations of other people will greatly reduce unnecessary frustration and suffering in both your life and theirs, and help you refocus on the things that truly matter. So please consider this. Do you know what are some possible expectations that might be a little bit out of line? So a couple things: not to expect that everyone will love you, that everything should be done the way you want it to be done. Don't expect that people should act the way you want them to or say what you want them to say. Don't expect that they know what you're thinking, and don't expect that they always have to be okay. I think this is important because we do kind of look at other people and we think like, oh, you know, you're so strong and things are so good in your life, but the truth is everybody's fighting a battle. I wanted to help you have a visual to think about what's a healthy relationship and what's unhealthy. So maybe later come back and look at this slide and think about your relationships. And if you see in that relationship that more words pop up on the right side of the screen than on the left side, then you might want to think about, should I really continue that relationship? Because there are plenty of people you can have a healthy relationship with. You do not need the unhealthy relationships. And unfortunately, there's a book I read called Sick People, and it helps you to understand who toxic people are in your life. And unfortunately, sometimes our toxic people may be people in our family. For me, it was my mom, and that was hard, but recognizing it was helpful. So a couple things on your end that you want to watch for as a friend, because when we think about having friends, we want to ask ourselves, am I being the friend that I want to have? So watch for being negative. Sometimes we can just get in all the negative stuff. Don't be a whiner. Before you're with somebody, think about what would you like to talk about. So there comes in your the gratitude list. You know, things that you're interested in if you do some research on them. These are things that you can talk about. Think about what they're interested in now. And don't keep score. Oh, I'm not going to call them because it's their turn to call me. I'm not going to take them to coffee because I took them to coffee twice and they've never taken me to coffee. You know what? That doesn't do us any good. So if you can, just put away the scorecard and just, you know what, just if you call somebody, just I want to call them because I want to call them. And don't expect that because you did, they're going to do anything back for you. This goes back to the expectations. So just consider that. And jealousy, yeah, that just doesn't work anywhere. Be dependable. Don't gossip. It feels good to gossip. I don't know why that is. It does. But we really need to guard against it. It's not healthy. It doesn't do any good for anybody. Don't be a nag. One of the things I learned early in my marriage with my husband, he did not like being nagged. And I realized I could be quite a nag. So I had to work on that. Guard against a critical spirit. You know, always criticizing others, always seeing the negative in everything. Listen to yourself. And I know that's really not what you want to do. And the other thing is encourage other people. And here's the gift in that is that when you encourage other people, it's amazing how much you'll feel encouraged yourself. So one of the biggest lessons, like I have these 7 big things I learned in my journey to getting better. And this is one of the biggest ones, was remembering it's not all about me. So remember I told you I thought that for me, my bipolar kept me in a room of mirrors. Everything was about me. And I think it was just realizing that, not everything is about me. That said, the me is really important in this equation. And so one of the things that we really need to do to be connected to other people is like ourselves. Now, I don't know about you, but this was huge for me. I hated myself. I lived for years in self-loathing, and I was a perfectionist, so everything I did in my eyes was a failure. But to have healthy relationships with others, this is a really important foundation for that. So if you need to, go to the library, get a book on self-esteem, and here's a couple other things. Make a list of 5 things you do well, and hang it where you can see it, and add to it. And if you can't come up with it, then ask a few people, but there are at least 5 things that you do well. Maybe you do really well making chili. Maybe you do really well keeping in touch with friends. Maybe you're really good at singing. So whatever it is, make a list, add to that, and hang it where you see it to remind yourself of what you do well. And then make a list of what you like. What are you interested in? And get out there and teach yourself more about those things that you're interested in. This is the thing you can do when you find yourself by yourself. But the other part is, as you build your education and the things that interest you, it also gives you more things to talk about that aren't related to your illness. So sometimes I think we overtalk our illness. Look for positive support groups. Support groups are great. However, I would recommend that you avoid groups where all they do is talk about problems. For a while, I was mandated to go to support groups, and I found it really draining. I thought people put on their group face, and they got really sad in the group, but they were fine after group. And I really wanted to be in groups where I got solutions. So look for those that are giving you some positive feedback. Okay, the next one's going to sound funny, but practice conversations in front of the mirror, or you can record yourself on your cell phone and notice if you look friendly. And I put this there because years ago I was in sales, and early in my sales career I went to a convention and heard this guy speak. Never forget him. His name was David Cooper. He was this little short funny guy. He thought he was funny. He made all these little weird laughs. But one of the things he taught us this little sales technique, and he said, go home and practice this in front of the mirror. And I thought, that was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I'd never do that. But you know what? Okay, I did it. And I will tell you, it actually really helped. So I felt silly, felt ridiculous, but it did help me. So try this, and it's not going to hurt anything, and it might help you too. And another thing is just keeping a journal of your thoughts and feelings. And use your lonely times or those times by yourself to think about some of the changes that you want to make. So to kind of wrap this up, what I want to do is to help you think of some ways to connect with other people, things that you can do, places that you can go, things that you can see. And I lost my little cursor. There we go. So here's a great list for you. And you could add to this as one of those things. I thought, what else do you know? Because this is not all inclusive by any means, but I do think that these are some helpful ideas. I put the website here for San Diego meetups. Probably most of you have heard of those. I really wasn't too familiar with them. But, oh my gosh, you can connect with anybody for anything. So if you like bonsai trees, you can connect with other people who like bonsai trees. If you like running around a pool, you can probably find 10 other people who like running around a pool. So it's kind of interesting, and I think definitely worth trying out. Being careful, that maybe you tell a friend where you're going or take a friend with you. But there's a lot of really wonderful opportunities. I have a friend who got into a hiking group through this meetup, and she loves it. So, and then this one of my favorites is get a dog and get a cute dog and then walk that cute dog, because you will connect with other people. But if you can't have a dog where you live, you can become a dog walker and you can walk a dog. And pets are just good for us anyway, but it is a great way to connect. Go to dog park and you just start talking to people. And people take their dogs to the Starbucks where I live. And I always stop and talk to them because their dogs are adorable. So anyway, it's just another thing to begin to think about. Another thing is, getting out. Sometimes we don't have a lot of money and can't afford to do things that cost money. But it was great. There's a lot of free things you can do in San Diego, including going to the museums at Balboa Park on Tuesdays. So every Tuesday there is a museum that is available for free. So I hope some of that's been helpful for you. I just want to give you a couple of resources also for finding activities, the San Diego Reader, which is available online, so that's good, or you can find it in a paper form in some coffee shops. They carry it. I gave you the website for free things to do in San Diego. This volunteer match, that's a very interesting website. Volunteering can be one of the most healthy things you can do, and this could help you explore some of those opportunities. And I've just given you some websites of things that you might like to read further. Okay, this next slide, I don't know, for your entertainment. So this is one of the ones maybe you want to add. I just thought about songs about friends. Some of us connect musically, so I like listening to music. And I did put on a couple of video clips that I think are helpful in terms of developing relationships, and just a couple of movies that are good to watch that have some good meaning in friendships there. Again, what do you think? What would you add to that list? So one of the best ways to have a friend is to be a friend. And I think that that's one of the things you want to think about. And of all the things that you take away from today, I hope that you will understand the difference between when you feel lonely and the benefits of being alone. And remember that that has a lot to do with what's going on in your mind. And one of the things I wanted to do was to tell you truth today, and as I understand it. And one of the things I want to leave you with in this last slide is that you are stronger than you know, and you are more capable than you ever dreamed, and you are loved more than you could possibly imagine. This is your truth. Sometimes you won't believe this truth, but this is the truth about you. And I want you to save this, print it out, and remind yourself every day that you can do this. And it's a little step at a time. So we've got right up to our end here, and I'm sorry that we lost our connection there for a little bit. Debbie, do we still have time to do some questions?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So we do have a few that have come in while you've been speaking, so we'll go right to those. And then
Right.
for the rest of you, if you have something that you want to ask of Kathy, please hop on that question area in your control panel and send me a question, and I will share that with Kathy. The first question would be, how do you feel, Kathy, about a person who has bipolar, who at one time was very confident and sociable? And how do you feel that the mental state can change at seemingly like a moment's notice? And how this person is asking how to get help to get back to where he or she was previously. How do I become more confident and just put my foot out there?
That's such a great question. I don't know that I have the best answer for that, but I think it is that it would be to remind yourself that you are still that same person. You haven't changed. Maybe some circumstances came in, made life a little bit more difficult. But again, what are you telling yourself? I think that's the biggest thing, is what is the message you are telling yourself? Have you told yourself that you failed? Well, you know what? You didn't fail. Maybe you fell down. Maybe things didn't go right. But that doesn't mean you're a failure. So that, I think it is our sense of ourself that we failed in some way that really pulls away that confidence. Sometimes our confidence goes away because of the way we get treated when we have a diagnosis. You know, I was like kind of in a normal world, if you want to say that, and then once I got a diagnosis, whoo, people just, you know, retreat. But you know what? It took a lot of therapy to realize that I am still that same person. I just have a different challenge. So I hope that you'll think about, what are you telling yourself? Tell yourself the truth and get some help there, you know, and somebody who can help you to recognize the truth about yourself. I hope that helps.
Excellent answer. Thank you very much. The next question is asked, what is a good way to get yourself to set a 5-minute timer when you're referring to the challenge of a particular task when you don't feel like doing it, you don't feel like doing anything?
So that was the whole point of that exercise. It's doing what you don't feel like doing. So the only thing I can tell you is some point of the day to tell yourself, make a commitment to yourself that I don't want to set a timer, I don't want to do anything, and I'm going to do it. And if nothing else, just say, I'm just going to try it. The only thing that can make you do it is you. And I know that's hard because sometimes we don't feel any empowerment at all. But the truth is that you can do that. And if 5 minutes seems too much, then for goodness sakes, do 2 minutes. You know, start where you can. And what's great and what helped me was I was able to do those 5 minutes for a couple of days, and I saw I could do something. And it just changed part of my message, which was I can't do anything. So maybe back down on the time, just try 2 minutes and see how that works. But nothing can make you do that except your own decision to do that. So I wish there was another way.
Excellent. No, thank you so much. Let's see, the next, it's actually a request. Can you please show the opposite actions table again?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Let me just see it. I just have to find it. Sorry. Okay.
While you're looking for that, there are a number of very positive comments thanking you for your insight and sharing with us today. Many helpful tips. And again, if there is a question that you might think of after the fact, please feel free to email me and I will forward that to Kathy, and she'll be happy to answer questions that might come about in your head after we end this webinar. So here you have this screen, and also I want to remind you that this talk is being recorded and will be archived on our website so that you can share with others, or again, go back and look at her slides. And I am happy also to send you the slide deck without the video, if that would be helpful for you as well. Again, many thank yous, and thank you so much, Kathy. I think this is, again, a wealth of information for all of us, and we're very happy that you shared with us today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to do so.
All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day. We'll see you at the next webinar. Bye-bye.